Welcome to It's All About the Questions, where learning to ask the right questions can help you achieve lifelong success. Now, here to help you ask all the right questions is award-winning author, international speaker, and business strategist, Laurie Stewart.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It's hard to believe I've been saying that for over 6 years now, approaching my 7th year doing this show, first on broadcast radio and then live stream the last year and a half. And I have to say that, as always, this is my favorite time of the week, is when I get to be here with my listeners, those listening on live stream, watching us with video as well as audio. Thank you for always joining in. And those who are listening on the podcast, thank you for making this show one of the top 3% of all shows globally. Really grateful for that. That's not just a category thing. That's top 3% globally. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I know that the reason my show is so popular and that so many of you send me notes and emails is because, and texts, because some of you have my cell phone number, which I've given out in the past, is because of my wonderful, wonderful guests. And my guest today has been on the show several times, and she hasn't been on in a while now. And we've been talking about doing it, and lots of things, tech and otherwise, have made it so that she wasn't able to be on, but we have her on here today. And I'm really happy to have her on because she's somebody that I met through the Vero Beach Book Center. Cynthia Callender used to be the director of publicity for the book center, still one of the most awesome independent bookstores that I know in Vero Beach. And she's like, you need to come to this particular book signing. And I said, oh, okay. So I brought my mom, we went over and we listened to Dr. Laurie Nadel talk about her book, The 5 Gifts. This was several years ago. Discover hope, healing, and strength when disaster strikes. And Laurie and I have become friends since then. And I still, as you can tell, I've never taken the dog ears or the little Post-it notes out. I've even added some different color ones over the years because the book has helped me through so much. So let's just bring Laurie right back into the show. For those watching on video, she is now live on camera. So Laurie, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Laura.
It's so great to have you, and you blip in. So I don't know if you want to repeat what you just said, but we had silence.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I do apologize if there's any background noise. There's some work going on outside that I have no control over, but hopefully it won't interrupt the flow of our conversation.
Well, that's what just proves to everybody that it's live radio, right?
Sure.
Yeah, not really radio, but it is a live stream. Now, I've had your book for a number of years since we got there, and it still sits somewhere that I can grab it easily. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately with COVID and all these other things that are happening. Where I live, there seem to be constant car crashes. There's, and I live in a very sleepy area, yet it seems like there's more traffic, there's more accidents, there's more craziness with police. And then I look at COVID, right? A couple of dear friends of mine who have been extremely careful, except they recently went to some holiday parties, fully vaccinated, fully boosted, have gotten COVID, pretty sick. I think I'm just going to blurt it out. Here's my question. 1 year, 2 years, 6 months, is there ever a point where the body just begins to accept that whatever the change is that's happening around you or to you is what it's going to be? Or does that never really happen?
Excuse me just a second. I'm looking for a quote from a book called Epidemics and Society, From the Black Death to the Present. And this is a book written by a Yale historian named Frank Snowden. And I'm a masochist, so I read all 600 some pages about a year ago. And it's something that I'd like to bring up, later in the context of the show, because you touched on a word that I say to people all the time. There is now people's nerves are frayed, and their level of craziness that has never existed before, in my experience anyway. People are moments that just blow up over nothing. Friendships, very long friendships, which just kind of dissolve with an unexpected argument. Best friends go away on trips, and 2 days into the trip, there's an absolutely desperate argument and a blow up, and there goes 30 years of friendship. Car accidents increasing, as you can see. I mean, bizarre crimes, homicides. I mean, they joke about Florida Man, but Florida Man is everywhere. People are just doing really insane things. New York, where I had my office and lived for many, many years, I had to shut down my office when the pandemic started. And, from what I hear, it's just no longer safe to walk around my old neighborhood after dark. Women just don't go out at night right now because the level of crime has increased. So, the question of whether we, do you accept it? I think you have to come to terms with it, that things are very unstable right now and volatile right now, and that we're living in a time of turbulence. And the pandemic, whatever you may think about what caused it, or about vaccines, or about masks, it is a fact of life. And it is creating upheaval in all areas of life. And it's go away. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Hopefully, we as a species will develop immunity to it as it mutates, and it will become less of a deadly virus. That's what we can hope. Do we ever get used to living with craziness? I think that you get numb to living with craziness. And I think that part of what's happening is that people are starting to really shut down and get numb to the chaos that's around us. So I think that is kind of a danger in terms of one of the kind of ripple effects of the pandemic.
Why is becoming numb a danger?
Well, as I write about it, since I wrote The Five Gifts, was because I was aware that we were living in a time of increasing disasters. There were three types of disasters. There are natural disasters, there are environmental disasters, and there are intentional, human-to-human disasters, like a mass fatality attack, bombing, shooting, that kind of thing. And those have all been increasing over the last, certainly the last, let's say, 20 years since September 11th. The incidents have been increasing. And when you turn on your phone or you turn on your screens, I mean, there's everybody gets a news feed, kind of whether you like it or not. At some point during the day, breaking news will pop up on your screen. And it's just all too easy to swipe and go to a cat video or go to your favorite sports team, or, watch videos. I have friends who just they can just sit there watching TikTok videos forever. And what it does is it numbs you out to the actual human price of what happens when there is a disaster. And when there is a disaster, we're talking about sudden, violent, and unexpected death or near death to anywhere from, one person to thousands of people, or in this case, millions of people around the world who were going along, living their lives in normal mode, whatever that was. And then they got hit by this virus, and now they're no longer with us. And I forget what the global death rate is from this pandemic. And what happens is, after a while, especially because we are kind of afflicted with 24/7, so-called news and information and cable news cycles, is that the tsunami of misinformation that people are subjected to whether it's, from social media, or whether it's from talk radio, or whether it's from cable news, wherever it is, or whether it's from the government or this government or another government, or which government is telling the truth, or is it the CDC or is it the World Health Organization? I mean, it just becomes so overwhelming that people shut down. But all of that misinformation and confusion, it kind of stays in the collective subconscious. And so people don't know nobody knows what you can hold on to. Can you hold on to the fact that vaccines are helpful? Pretty much, I think. I mean, they keep they're definitely lowering or keeping the death rate from this virus from escalating. But are they really effective if you end up with COVID after you've had your vaccines? People have questions, and nobody can answer those questions. And so people start numbing out. And when people numb out, that's when you start to see the car accidents, people cursing at each other. I've had friends standing on checkout lines in places like Whole Foods where suddenly somebody starts arguing with them, or they'll ask somebody to please pull their mask up, and the person turns around and becomes belligerent. Or somebody punches out a flight attendant who says, "Sir, could you please put your mask up?" So I think that the violence that we're seeing is kind of it's an expression of the helplessness that we feel, because we really don't have real facts. Everybody's dealing and wrestling with the chaos and the unpredictability and the unknowability of what is it that we're really dealing with here. We're going into year 3, and we still have no idea how we treat this. Where did it come from? What is it doing? Is it going to get worse? We thought it was going to get better because we had vaccines, and people took masks off, and people were socializing, and people were going back to big events and rallies in the park and going to concerts and sports events. And now suddenly, there's like a new wave, and everything shuts down, and people get scared. And when people get scared, people get angry because it feels better than feeling helpless. And that's why I wrote the 5 gifts, because even though I had no idea that there would be a pandemic, I did know that disasters were increasing and that we were living in it was a very troubling trend. And we need a different mindset to deal with the kind of the big picture turbulence and violence and sudden shifts in the basic facts that we're trying to navigate our lives with. So that's why I wrote the book, because we need a different mindset to get through, to navigate these unstable conditions that are now pretty much a fact of life.
Now, you went from being a journalist to a psychologist, helping people go through and work themselves through these things that you used to report on or write on and all of that. And, I sit here and I say to myself, and I'm considered a journalist. I remember the first time somebody called me a journalist from having the radio show and reporting and doing things. I don't report on current events, but I interview people about different things that are going on, and I write for magazines and stuff. But you mentioned the social media, you mentioned the news feeds, all of that stuff. How much of a play does that in triggering the emotions that we're seeing? I mean, I'm into cybersecurity because of my tech background. And, I look at anything that crosses my social media feed as, well, is that a real player, or is that from somebody else trying to manipulate? And I am dog sitting, and the dog really, really, really wants to sit on my lap right now. So it keeps trying to crawl on top of me. So it's quite funny, that little thing that I've got going on over here. So I wonder, how much does that play into it? You talked about going numb and watching TikTok videos and all that, but those to me can create even more of an anger and a whatever, because there's subtle things going on in the TikTok world. One of the challenges, stick a penny, lick it in an electrical thing. I mean, come on. There's so many of these challenges that are out there that people are doing for escapism that are actually creating more violence and more discomfort, but yet people are gravitating to them. So I feel like there's some sort of link to all of that. But from your perspective as a journalist, as an author, as a psychologist, what can we do to help ourselves with that? Because I mean, I don't even know when something's on the news anymore, when it passes what I think are legitimate news sources, how to filter some of that stuff. Is it real? Is it not?
Right. It's almost, I think it's almost impossible to know, what's real. I mean, I have certain sources that I'm kind of old guard. So, I'll read the Associated Press, I'll read Reuters, which is British news agency, and I'll watch the BBC News a few times a week because and the Canadian news also, because they look at the United States through a lens, so they tend to be more observers, and they tend not to have that hysterical edge that even the so-called used to be very fact-based evening news shows with Walter Cronkite, who I had the honor of working with, and Dan Rather. There was we were taught to report the facts, and you present one side of the argument, present the other side, you keep it balanced, and you pretty much let the viewer decide for themselves. Although there was always a little bit of opinion when the reporter was standing up, at the end of the piece for like 10, 15 seconds, kind of wrapping it up or summarizing it. So there was always some editorial opinion. The gist of the story was always there, in a factual way. Social media is totally out of control. I really think that a lot of it is evil. And the fact that you can live stream a murder on Facebook, to me, is enough so that
horrible.
I mean, if I don't have any say in anything, but to me that would be grounds for just shutting it down. If it's used to, if Facebook was used to announce something like the Parkland school shooting, and some deranged kid could get on Facebook and propose and threaten, and nothing was done about that, then I think that having these channels, I guess, or platforms where people can propose, or people can threaten, or people can carry out and people can carry out and execute acts of mass violence. I think it's evil, and that should really it should be stopped. And the fact that it's not stopped, I think, is significant, because I know that people believe in freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and I've been criticized by friends of mine in different chat rooms with researchers that what I'm proposing is a violation of freedom of expression. But if you shout out, that you have a bomb, or there's a fire in a crowded movie theater, or you make a joke about a bomb on an airport line while you're waiting for your luggage to be screened, you will be taken away and interrogated and investigated and stopped,
right,
because it's taken seriously. And threats that are made on social media should be taken seriously. And challenges that are asking people to drink bleach, or eat Tide Pods, or stick pennies in light sockets, I don't know where those are coming from. But without regulation, and the fact that people are spending many more hours a day staring at these kind of constantly moving streams of videos and images, and whatever it is that people do on Facebook, engaging in meetings on social media, I think it's taking us in an evolutionary direction that's not really helpful for us as a species. And I hope that everything's going well here, because I keep getting these yellow boxes that are dropping down onto my screen. So I just wanted to.
You're fine. I'm having no trouble hearing you or seeing you. Let me, while we're at that moment, let me interject something here. So I look at all of that and listen to what you're saying, and I wonder, what can people do when they're trying to use these forms of escapism? I know lately for myself, I think I recorded over 70 holiday movies. Probably closer to 80 between Hallmark Channel, Lifetime, Hallmark Movies and Mysteries, and the new GAC family, which is the old CEO of Hallmark, right? And I just was watching them because I'm normally of the opinion that Hallmark movies are sort of innocuous. They're very positive. They have these great messages of hope, and in the worst crisis, something good will come from it, right? And because I've been watching so many of them, part of me is wondering if even that good, happy stuff is creating some sort of stress in my body of, I want that life. I want that world where everything ends like a Hallmark movie ends, where you come out of the crisis even stronger, where, in 2 hours, everything wrapped up, you find the love of your life. It happens in a week and life is wonderful. So, where's the balance with all of that? How do you find that for you and not even allow the over positive things and the over negative things to begin reprogramming your being?
Well, I think that balance, with anything, whether it's food or exercise or entertainment, is something that we have to modulate for ourselves. So if you told me that you recorded 80 Hallmark movies and that you weren't getting any work done because you were sitting and watching them, that would be a concern. If you're watching them over the holidays. I think that one of the, I guess, the magic, if you will, of things like originally, the Disney channels, television programs, Disney World, the whole Disney experience, was that it takes you out of your everyday life, and it gives you the magic and the comfort of playing with fantasy and imagination in a very kind of whole and harmless and fun way. And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to live happily ever after? We all want to live happily ever after. And I don't think that it's bad in any way to get the emotional comfort and the happy feelings that you get when we watch something that gives us that happy ending. But to be aware that in life, endings are nebulous, I guess you could say. Some people have happy endings. All of us, everybody has adversity in our life. And I think that it's, social media kind of takes people away to a certain degree from dealing with adversity head on. But there are other people who use social media as a way of finding support. So I just wanted to talk about the long COVID community. So when people get COVID, about to between 10 and 30% of the population, which are millions of people now who have long COVID and who are isolated and who develop neurological issues, vascular issues, heart issues that are long-term or possibly permanent and disabling. And they're isolated. And this is not a society where illness is considered a part of life, because we worship health and beauty and celebrity and athletes. And, you don't see a special show about old, sick people. You just see special shows about young, healthy people. And so if you're sick, if you're a woman, if you're older, if you have a mysterious illness, and now you're going into year 3, and social media has formed communities for people where they can share contacts and resources and which doctors are helpful and which treatments work and where to get the right kind of test So I don't want to sound like I'm bashing social media. It serves, many productive functions, especially for people who are isolated now with long COVID, which is really quite a devastating condition that's now recognized by the government. And there actually is a movie documentary about long COVID, which is called Long Haul the Movie, which you can see online, or if you go to pulmonarywellness.org, there should be a link to the movie. And it talks about it interviews with people, including myself, who are involved with the long COVID community. So I'm sorry for that sidebar, but I did want to step in and say
No, thank
social
you for
media,
doing that.
it serves a positive function. But I think, you kind of have to monitor, um, what are you doing for comfort and distraction and escape? And is it preventing you from doing what you need to do to live your life, to be responsible, to have a fulfilling life to the degree that you're looking for a fulfilling life? Not everyone is looking for a fulfilling life. Some people just want to kind of be distracted and have fun and not really think about things too much. And I think that, what the question that you just asked is, when we're bombarded with all of these images and messages and craziness and commercials that are coming at us in tiny little flash frames sometimes of imagery and video that's less than 2 seconds long. It lodges in the brain, but the
Right.
brain can't sort it out. So the unconscious mind has a very hard time kind of filtering and sorting and what's the word I'm looking for? Discerning, what's real and what's not real. And it just kind of, it's like it clogs us up so that, we get this kind of weird kind of mental feeling of as I would call it, lethargy or malaise, or in Spanish in Peru, they call it abulia. Abulia is just kind of like the terminal lethargy, where it's like, why bother? What's the point? Things are really bad. It doesn't make any difference what I do. Let me just, I'm just going to keep looking at Facebook, or, oh, look, there's a cat video. And I think that numbing out makes us less able to function when we ourselves are stricken with a disaster or emergency. It makes us less compassionate to ourselves and other people, and it makes us less alert and less able to make critical decisions when we have to navigate a crisis. So that's why, a kind of a circular way of answering your question, why it's numbing out is not good for us as a people or a species.
Well, how do you find that balance?
Well, I think everybody's balance is different. I mean, for me, I need to spend a lot of time in the water. I mean, I'm a water person, so I need to live where I'm in a climate where I can be outdoors, and where I can get a significant amount of time in water that's comfortable, so that I can move around and swim. It's healthier for my body. That makes a difference for me, and it clears my mind. For some people, it's walking or running, and for some people, there are online activities that they do that they find are very enjoyable or uplifting. People play games like Words with Friends online. Some people find that doing research online is just a rewarding activity that they enjoy, whether or not, their research, the danger of that, of course, is there's so much misinformation out there that, sometimes what people call research is negative propaganda. So, how do you find a balance with that? I don't have an answer to that one. I think you have to monitor the amount of screen time that you have, and kind of put yourself on some kind of a schedule where you're only going to, watch TikTok at certain times of the day, or you're going to limit it to, 1 hour in the morning and 2 hours after work. But, it has to kind of be in balance with the rest of your life. And that would be a very individual decision.
Okay, so you said put yourself on a schedule for watching TikToks or things like that, but would putting yourself on a schedule for other things help people through all the different crises that we keep hearing about as well? Schedules for, here's when you'll take phone calls. Here's when you're going to sit and work. Here's when you'll do your financial stuff. Can putting yourself on some sort of schedule help get rid of that? I love the phrase terminal lethargy that seems to be hitting, or terminal overproductivness too, because I see that with a bunch of people.
Well, exactly. I mean, people, I kind of want to go back to my time as a reporter when I was living in South America, and this was way before the internet, and where people didn't even have cell phones. And, time was very haphazard. We think of time as digital time. And, we think, well, it's 7:53 and I have to get on the road to get to work, or I need to catch the 5:03 home. And at 12 noon, I've got the business meeting. And at 7 o'clock, I have my yoga class. And there are people who function in life by scheduling everything. And that gives them a sense of safety. But the problem with crises and unexpected events is that they don't happen in digital time. We used to have in TV news, there used to be a special events department or division. There still may be. And there were two types of special events, planned and unplanned. So the Olympics are a planned special event. Some people say that the epidemic was a planned special event, but we're not going to go there. Let's say an assassination would be an unplanned special event, or 9/11 would be an unplanned special event. And right now, we seem to be living in a state where there are unplanned special events every day of one magnitude or another. Within the bigger context of the pandemic, which can become an unplanned special event to any individual at any time. I mean, I may be living in kind of lockdown, almost a lockdown situation, where my exposure to people at this point is very limited. But even though I may be wearing a mask and I may be ultra cautious, I could go to a gas station or I could go to a store, and presumably, theoretically, I could have contact with somebody, and I could develop some form of COVID, and that would might be mild, as they say, but it would definitely stop my life for a period of time because of the need to isolate, the need to test and retest, and it could cause serious breathing problems. It could cause other problems, as well as, I know people who are young and healthy and fully vaccinated, and they've been very sick with COVID for a month, and with breathing difficulties and fatigue and brain fog. So it's very serious. So it can turn your life into an unplanned special event at any moment. Now, within the context of that, we have events like the Surfside building collapse. So Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, which is an organization where I was leading a group of firefighters who were sick with long COVID. You have a firefighting force, people who are very healthy and well-trained, who have been really under siege with 911 calls during the pandemic, and who were were working really, really hard, and many of whom were really tired because we were already in year 2 of the pandemic. 12-story building or 10-story building just collapsed, into the ground. And
a friend of mine from high school was a journalist, one of the journalists for the news stations down in Miami, reporting on that. And it was horrible to watch what she was going through. I can't even imagine the firefighters searching, like the 9/11 first.
Right. It was very much like 9/11. But when 9/11 happened, we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. So
Right.
so it's like, you're talking about like a baseline catastrophe that we're all living through, which is unprecedented, and then you have catastrophes with catastrophes. So it's like we're living in these very, very unstable and difficult and dangerous times. And which goes back to these 5 gifts, which came to me when I was meditating after I lost my house, and 95% of everything that I built, I lost to Hurricane Sandy in 2012, which affected 1 million people in the northeastern United States. Hurricane Sandy was a nightmare on many, many, many levels. And the ripple effect, went on for many years for people who lost their homes or lost everything, or were living in their cars, or had no place to go after the house they were living in was destroyed. It was really continues to complicate people's lives 10 years later. So I was really concerned that the rest of my life, I was just going to be dealing with the financial trauma from that disaster. And I sat down to meditate and to relax. And I have I guess, a spirit guide or an angelic guide, or a voice that speaks to me sometimes in times of crisis. That's not coming from, it doesn't feel like me, because I usually, at the point that I hear this voice, I don't know what to do. I'm just like in the state of confusion. And if I get quiet, I can hear this tiny inner voice, and it whispered 5 words, which were and are humility, patience, empathy, forgiveness, and growth. And those 5 words: humility, patience, empathy, forgiveness, and growth. And these are the 5 gifts that I was told would help me and help me to help others get through this disaster and other disasters as well. And
I know the first couple of times I've had you on the show, we really unpack those pretty deeply. The one that still kind of gets to me is forgiveness, because I never would think of that as much in, I know it's a gift to forgive, but in terms of when you're going through a crisis, when we're going through all the chaos, the forgiveness that you talk about in the 5 Gifts book is not necessarily forgiveness as most of us would think about it. Correct? Can you describe what the gift of forgiveness is as you talk about it in the 5 Gifts, discovering hope, healing, and strength when disaster strikes? For those who can't see, because you're listening to podcast, I'm holding up the book that I have read so many times, is so dog-eared, is so post-it noted.
Thank you. The gift of forgiveness, firstly, we think of forgiveness as like a light switch, that it's an on-off switch, and that you either forgive or you don't forgive. When in fact, you can step into what it's like to be forgiving. And when we are in a forgiving state, we can be forgiving 5%, we could be forgiving 20%, we could be forgiving 80%. We may never forgive 100%. But when we begin to feel what it's like to be forgiving, and usually, and this is going to sound strange, we need to forgive ourselves for being helpless to prevent what happened, whatever it is. When I work with people who've been sick with COVID for a few years now, at about the 1-year point, people would start to ruminate on, how did I get this? Oh, it was my coworker. I went to that meeting. Somebody sneezed on me. I was on the bus. Somebody coughed sitting next to me. And
I went to the grocery store because I needed food.
And then people get angry at themselves. Like, I shouldn't have done that. If only I hadn't done that. If only I hadn't been there. If only I had, not sat with that person or gone to that party. And we need to begin forgiving ourselves because we couldn't prevent it. I knew there was something wrong with that kid when my son showed me his Facebook post. I should have been more proactive in calling the authorities. You need to be forgiving of yourself, because we can only do our best in any given moment, when we're confronted with a situation like, oh, I have no food, or I really do need to go to that party because I've been working really hard and I haven't seen my friends in a long time. Social needs are very important. I don't think that sacrificing our social needs indefinitely is healthy for us psychologically. So when we go to a party and we get exposed to COVID, and then, it's not productive to sit there and blame yourself now for the period of sickness that you're going to go through. So we need to begin by forgiving ourselves. To say, I'm not perfect. I do my best. I made a choice. Now I'm not feeling well. It'll be okay. And I need to forgive myself. If you're a perfectionist, if you're somebody who is very critical of yourself, forgiving yourself is a big challenge, because it's not comfortable.
Me.
So something that we have to learn to do, and also to learn not to feel guilty if we're not able to forgive 100% immediately, because it's not a light switch. It's a state of being. Just like we can be feeling loving towards someone, but that doesn't mean that we love them 100%, all of the time, or, all of these self-help books that say you have to love yourself. You might love yourself, but you might not love yourself 100% all the time. But you can be loving towards yourself. You can be loving towards other people. You can be kind to yourself, and it's kinder to ourselves to be forgiving and say, we're all trying to navigate this horrible, horrible pandemic, which is really, I'll say it's like a nightmare of confused messages and misinformation, where nobody really knows what the facts are, and nobody really knows how it's going to play out or what's going to happen. And we have to be forgiving of ourselves and of people around us as much as possible. And it's not easy. Not easy.
Have you noticed with your practice, and because you're constantly being the helper, right? One of the big things, Dr. Nadell, that you do is, you work with the long haulers. You've worked with 9/11, Sandy Hook. I'm sure you're probably doing something with Surfside down in Miami, and Hurricane Sandy and all of those. You're always there helping. Have any of the people you're working with felt that their isolation, it's becoming almost agoraphobia, and they're afraid to be around people? What do you say to them, and how do you help some people who are now becoming afraid of humanity, even afraid to pet somebody's dog because they may get it from them, and they're becoming even more isolationist and having even greater anxiety? What do you say to them? I mean, it sounds like this is happening. I know I felt it for myself a little bit, but I was pre-COVID. I've been trapped in my house for years because of my ear with noise, even with earplugs. I'm kind of afraid to go out because anything can trigger that sound-induced disequilibrium for me.
I'm sorry that you have that. It must be very disorienting and disturbing. That's
what's most disturbing, though, is the almost anticipatory anxiety of, okay, I want to go out, but once it happens, I'm sort of disabled from it.
Right. I get
but
that.
Even with COVID, right? Because I have lots of friends with health issues. They're so petrified of going out that what if somebody lashes out, they're not wearing a mask, I'm masked, I'm not masked, who's masked? And then they go the opposite, right? Like, I know I'm kind of all over the place with this. I have some friends who have been incredibly, incredibly careful, and now they just got on a plane to Belize.
Mm-hmm.
they're like, I don't care anymore.
Right.
So
Right.
we've gone
People are
from
snappy.
this
Yeah.
paranoia to I can't leave the house to, well, I'm going to, or the other ones who now don't even go to grocery stores. Everything's delivered. They never leave their home.
Well, I do think that, there's a big trend of people isolating, that many people found that lockdown was kind of a relief because they found that they don't need to go out. They're actually happier not having to go out. And if they don't have to interact with a lot of people, life is easier for them. Then there were
Right.
other people who kind of snapped during lockdown, and as soon as they could go out and mingle with groups of people, even wearing masks, and they had to go out. And there were also a lot of people who are just kind of saying, well, I can't stay indoors anymore, and I can't worry about this virus anymore. And I know people who are going to Cuba, for example, and I know people who have been traveling to India and to the third world, and they take precautions. They feel like they can't let it stop their life anymore. But the social
Yeah, I have
phobia,
friends traveling all over, and I'm like, it freaks me out at the thought.
well, I mean, that the reality is, if you get sick in the third world, and if we really don't have enough hospitals and we don't have enough supplies, which is relatively sophisticated, on a global scale. If you get sick in a third world country, you're really there on your own, and you're going to be quarantined, and they probably are not going to have medications to treat you for COVID.
Right.
And so, I mean, if you go, you bring whatever supplies you can, but in many parts of the world, you really don't want to end up in one of their hospitals because they don't have antibiotics, they don't have antiseptics. You have to bring your own sheets and towels. It's dirty and chaotic at the best of times. So that the risk of traveling to exotic places right now is that if you do get sick, you could have to stay there for an extended period of time and really not have access to even the minimal kind of care that you could get here. And there's not a lot of treatment or care available here unless you've stocked up on certain supplies. So it's risky. But I think that a lot of people are, as I said, people's nerves are frayed and they're starting to snap. And so, when people snap, it's like, well, I don't care anymore. Somebody said, I don't care anymore. I'm going to Cuba. Now, I have friends who've been to Cuba. They're Cuban. They visit their families. They've been back and forth several times, and they haven't had any kind of issues or problems. Personally, I wouldn't travel to a third world country right now because, as much as I love to travel, I think the damage, if you were to get seriously ill right now, could be pretty. So that's just
Okay.
that's my own personal preference. In terms of
Well,
the
how do
social,
you handle the mental part of it, though?
the mental part of,
In
sorry?
terms of, we're seeing this where people are just done with the pandemic and they're just going out there, right? And then the ones that are more isolationist and staying in, and when they hear what the other groups are doing, there's a lot of this anger that happens on both sides of the equation. So what's your advice for each side of that to handle what the others are feeling and perhaps help somebody through that if they've got a family member that won't go out, or a family member that's going out all the time? I mean, it's creating a lot of angst.
It's creating a lot of friction. The thing is, you can't stop people from going out, but if you are, immunocompromised, or if you have health issues, where you have to isolate in your own room and minimize contact. And I do have long haulers who wear masks inside their own homes because their family members, the children are going to school, or they have family members who have to go out and work or have to ride public transportation. Just like when firefighters, at the beginning of COVID, I had a group for firefighter family members, wives and family members, because their husbands were getting exposed every day. And if or their husbands or wives were getting exposed every day, and when their partners would come home, if they were COVID positive, they would have to isolate in a room, so for as long as a month until the infection passed. They didn't have home tests at the time, so sometimes they didn't even have tests. So you just had to stay separate from everybody until you felt better. People who are dealing with social phobias and any long illness, convalescence, where you are more isolated, will tend to cause you to become more introverted, and you lose your skills. And so if I'm working with someone who's been isolated, has been alone for a long time, and who is having anxiety, for example, about having to go to a family function, or having to go to, having to go be with other people for some particular reason, or needing to go to a doctor's office, or needing to ship a package and they're afraid to leave their house, we can work on different types of tools and exercises. And there's a homeopathic remedy for anticipatory anxiety that is very affordable, that you can get at Whole Foods, or Amazon will ship it to you. And, that can help take the edge off the anxiety. And then there are certain self-care tools that people can use that can kind of help to take the edge off anxiety, so that you can push through it and you can accomplish what you need to accomplish. Becoming more comfortable socially or in social situations, if you've been isolated with illness for a long time, there's a learning curve to it. I mean, there actually a kind of coaching exercises that I would offer somebody, so that we could do, like with any phobia, to get reacquainted with the world at large a little bit at a time. But in terms of dealing with, your brother or your sister, or your partner who doesn't believe that COVID is real anymore, believe that you should be wearing masks, those become interpersonal issues, because there has to be ideally a mutual respect, where that you cannot control another person. And if you're living with somebody who is not careful, and you yourself have certain health concerns, there has to be kind of a negotiation process that goes on, so that neither side starts to feel unsafe or ridiculed, because again, people's nerves are fraying, and people have really volatile reactions when you meet somebody who's on the other side of the scale.
Right.
Who I love dearly, who are anti-vaxxers and don't believe in masks, and got very upset when they asked if I was getting vaccinated last year, and I said, of course. And they just kind of went off on that. One woman started crying, and I told her, I'm going to be, I don't know why you're crying, I'm going to be fine. And then she gave me this, kind of this diatribe, I guess, well-meaning diatribe about how bad the vaccines were. And, my response to that is I work with people, and there are millions of people who have been sick with COVID for 2 years and who are not getting better, and who have severe neurological problems now, and brain fog, cognitive problems now, and who may never work again. So the risk to your health from getting COVID, and the risk of death from COVID, is far greater than the risk to your health or the risk of death from any vaccine. And you have to kind of decide it for yourself. I mean,
Right.
it is ultimately a personal choice. But,
we're almost at the end of the show. So I know you just have so much wisdom to share with us, Laurie. Are you planning on writing a follow-up to the book with some more tools and different things that people can do? The 5 Gifts still holds today. It's an amazing book with lots of resources in it and everything. But I feel like there's a follow-up that you should be writing with everything we've learned the last few years.
Well, it's interesting you should say that. I know that when the printing sells out, I think it's pretty close. I can kind of update it. But I'm not really planning on writing another book anytime soon. It's interesting, and I really appreciate that you love the book, and I appreciate that the book is helpful and relevant now as times go on. I think it will become even more relevant. So I thank you. And appreciate you so very much for the show and the questions that you ask.
Where can people reach out to you, get more information, get some help from you, or resources that you've mentioned today?
You can find me on my website, laurienadel.com. That's my name, LaurieNadel.com. The book is available on Amazon along with my other books, Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power. And also the 5 Gifts is now an audiobook and it's available on Kindle and in print. And you can reach me through my website.
Yeah. Last thought you'd like to leave my listeners with?
The unwanted gift, the one that nobody wants, is patience. And, patience is the gift that helps us to deal with things that are going on a lot longer than we think they should. And we are not a patient culture. But I'm hoping that the gift of patience can help to soften some of the craziness and some of the arguments and some of the violence that we're seeing around us. And at least we can learn how to be a little more patient with ourselves, I hope.
I love being more patient with ourselves, because when you said patience, my thoughts went to all these ideas of, well, how patient do we have to be? How long do we have to have patience?
It's the unbearable gift. It's the gift that nobody wants. And I had a very hard time writing that chapter because I'm very patient. And I was literally blocked for 2 weeks. And I thought, this is really interesting because who wants patience? But with a disaster, any disaster, it takes 3 to 5 years to recover emotionally to the point where it just doesn't completely occupy all of your thoughts and feelings. So remember this in disaster terms, we're just starting to get to a new phase of coming to terms with and accepting that this is in the air and it's going to be with us for a while. And we need to be patient with ourselves as well as those around us. And that's a very hard lesson for us as Americans.
Yeah, I would agree with you that that's a hard lesson for us as Americans. We're used to instantaneous gratification on everything. I have friends that go to grocery stores and they're like, the shelves are bare, the shelves are bare. And I recently interviewed a friend of mine, Joe Serio. He wrote a book, Vodka Hookers and the Russian Mafia, from his time in Russia dealing with the mob and all this other stuff. And he shared how you never knew what was going to be on the shelves in Russia. And he came home and the grocery aisle was super long with so many choices. And I feel like we're finally, as a country, beginning to see what a lot of the rest of the world deals with on a daily basis. And I don't necessarily want what's going on for them. I like my choices. I like all of that other stuff, but it is interesting, this perspective shift that we're having to deal with right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very interesting. And, we are becoming a lot, it's very humbling. Like the first gift is humility, but it's very humbling that we are very similar to so many countries around the world. We always kind of felt that we were different in some way. We were superior. We were more affluent, we have more choices, we have more opportunities. And now we're really starting to see things like, hospitals, services breaking down, lack of consumer goods, difficulty buying. I mean, America, the great automaker country, we can't get a new car. It's just so many crazy things have happened that have really shaken up our worldview. And I think that humility is really, it's the foundational gift. It's the realization. And, we're just like everybody else. We're all human beings struggling to get, through this life. And, we're not special and we're not better than anybody else. And as Americans, we're really just the same as everybody else. And now we have to deal with the same or very similar chaos and lack of security when you go to the store as to what will be there or what won't be there. And humility is the gift that helps us to expect the unexpected and come to terms with it.
Right. And just as we're ending, the 5 gifts once again: humility, patience,
empathy. And I think, again, what numbness does, basically short circuits empathy. So when we try to distract ourselves by getting numb with whatever it is we're doing, when disaster strikes, we need empathy in order to get through it. We see the courage and resilience of the people around us, and we need that empathy connection. Forgiveness is the 4th gift, and growth is the 5th gift. And like it or not, we are all growing through this pandemic. We are changing, we are learning, we are adopting. And I don't think that anyone, honestly, if we are ruthlessly honest with ourselves, we're not quite the same person we were before the pandemic. And growing is the gift that lets us to distill from the experience what we need to learn so that we can integrate that knowledge and move forward and make better decisions for ourselves and the people we love as we go forward.
I love that. It's a perfect spot to end today. We went a little bit long, but that's the beauty of not being on broadcast anymore. I don't have to shut somebody down for any one particular time. So, Dr. Laurie Nadel, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for writing the book and being a multiple time repeat guest on my show to talk about a topic that I think is so important for us as human beings on the planet. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for your excellent questions. And thank you for having me on the show.
Always a joy. Dr. Laurie Nadel has been on the show a number of times, and you can catch some more in-depth conversations that I had with her talking about her book, The 5 Gifts, from when it first came out. I think this is maybe the 4th time that she's been on the show. And there's a lot of tools, a lot of resources in this book to help you. I know that it helps me get through things, and just knowing that there are people like Dr. Laurie Nadel out there that can help you. Know you're not alone. If you need some help, please reach out to somebody. If you don't know who to reach out to, shoot me a note on social or via email, and reach out to Dr. Laurie Nadel, and we can try to find you. But you are not alone. Remember that no matter what you're going through, there's somebody out there who's willing to help you. Have a great day, everybody. And remember, the right questions can change your life.
You've been listening to It's All About the Questions, starring Laura Stewart. Connect with Laura at it'sallaboutthequestions.com and download a free workbook that will help you ask better questions starting today.